Everyone says you need at least $1 million to retire comfortably. That's like the baseline number we hear in articles, podcasts, and from so-called retirement experts. But here's the surprising reality. Millions of Americans are retiring with less than $500,000 saved or less than $500,000 in net worth. Some of them have even less than $100,000. And yet, they're making it work and living surprisingly well. So, how are they pulling this off? How do you leave the workforce and actually survive, even thrive, without hitting that $1 million milestone? Let's take a look at the numbers, the strategies they're using, the trade-offs they're making, and see some real examples. Honestly, some of these numbers might surprise you. The first thing to understand is that this isn't rare. A lot of people assume everyone's sitting on giant retirement accounts, but the numbers tell a very different story. According to Federal Reserve data, the median household retirement savings for Americans between 65 and 74 years old is only about $200,000. And that's the median, meaning half of retirees have less than that and half have more. And even when you factor in home equity and other assets, the median net worth for this age group is around $400,000. Keep in mind, those figures are not for an individual, they're for a household. So, if you're sitting there worried that your nest egg isn't even close to 7 figures, you're not alone. You're actually in the majority. But here's where things get interesting. Even though many people are retiring with smaller savings, they're still finding ways to make it work. And one of the biggest reasons why they can is Social Security. Right now, the average Social Security benefit is about $2,000 per month, or roughly $24,000 per year. It might not sound like a lot, but for many retirees, it covers a significant portion of their basic expenses. And once you're retired and your lifestyle shifts, that money often stretches further than you'd expect. Let's say you have someone with $500,000 in a retirement portfolio. And let's assume that's the majority of their money, meaning no home owned outright or other significant savings. You could use a 4% withdrawal rate, or even 5%, which the original researcher behind the guideline recently suggested could be the updated version. You're looking at $20,000 to $25,000 in annual income. Not enough to get by on its own, but if you add in the average Social Security benefit, you're looking at $44,000 to $49,000 in annual income. But many retired people don't live alone. They have a spouse. So if they're bringing in 2 average Social Security incomes, that brings their annual income to $68,000 to $73,000. That should cover a reasonable level of expenses, including rent. Now, what if that same couple owns their home outright? Instead of having $500,000 invested, most of their wealth is tied up in their primary residence, and they have little to nothing in an investment portfolio. In that case, they're mostly relying on Social Security, around $48,000 per year combined, but because they no longer have a mortgage, their housing costs are minimal. Their income is lower, but their expenses are, too. A hybrid strategy tends to be the most common. For instance, owning a modest condo, townhome, or even a small mobile home outright to eliminate mortgage payments while keeping around half of the savings invested. For someone with a net worth of $500,000, this could mean a $250,000 home and $250,000 in investments, generating roughly $10,000 to $12,500 in annual income in addition to other sources. Is that glamorous? No, but with the right adjustments, it's very doable, especially if you make lifestyle changes to stretch those dollars further. And that brings us to the next big factor: downsizing. A huge number of retirees are keeping costs low by downsizing their lives. Most commonly, that includes selling the family home and moving into a smaller, more affordable place. In fact, surveys show that 32% of retirees downsize within the first 5 years of retirement. And it's not just about housing costs. Downsizing often means getting rid of the second car that's no longer needed and focusing spending only on what adds value. Most people are surprised to realize just how much clutter they've accumulated over the years. How much of it adds no real value and how few things they actually consider truly worthwhile. Think about it. The big house with the high property taxes, the landscaping bills, and the constant upkeep and the heating and cooling for more rooms than ever get used. That's money better spent elsewhere for 1 or 2 retired people. By selling a home that's just too big for your needs, you could potentially unlock hundreds of thousands of dollars in equity, which can be reinvested or used to pad retirement savings. But even with downsizing, many retirees are still supplementing their income. And that's where part-time work comes in. Retirement doesn't have to mean never working again. It means having control over the work they do and the hours they put in. About 25% of retirees report working part-time, either out of necessity or simply to stay active. And it's not always a traditional job like checking receipts at large box stores. It might be consulting in a field they spent decades building expertise in or picking up flexible remote work like customer service or bookkeeping. Others go the gig economy route, driving for ride-share apps, doing delivery or taking on seasonal jobs. Some even turn hobbies into income streams, selling stuff online, teaching music lessons, or teaching a class or setting up a spot at a craft fair or a farmer's market a few times per year. The goal isn't to build wealth at this stage. It's about smoothing out cash flow to either keep savings intact for longer or for supplemental income. Being open to working, even a little, can take a lot of pressure off your portfolio, especially during market downturns. For instance, putting in a day or two of work each week during periods of high inflation or a stock market slump can really help preserve your investments. Research shows that having this flexibility and being able to withdraw less during tough times can seriously improve long-term portfolio sustainability and potentially allow higher withdrawal rates. Another growing trend among people who want to stretch their money further is geo-arbitrage. In other words, moving somewhere your money goes a lot further. This could mean relocating to lower-cost states within the U.S. But more people are taking it a step further and retiring abroad. Countries like Portugal, Mexico, Thailand, and Costa Rica have become hotspots for retirees. Why? Because $2,500 a month can stretch shockingly far. Housing is cheaper, healthcare is often more affordable, and the cost of food and utilities is lower. For example, a couple trying to retire on $500,000 in New York City could very well feel squeezed every single month, possibly needing roommates to make the numbers work. Move that same couple to Portugal and suddenly the math works and they can live comfortably without constantly worrying about running out of money. Now, what about someone who wants to retire early with $500,000 or less? A $500,000 portfolio might provide roughly $20,000 to $25,000 per year if you follow a 4 to 5% withdrawal strategy. That's not a lot by traditional retirement standards. So, it takes a little more creativity and a willingness to rethink how and where you live. For most people, the biggest factor by far in stretching income is housing, since it's almost always the largest expense. The most effective strategies usually involve some form of house hacking in a duplex or multi-family home or sharing a place with roommates. And there are plenty of creative ways to make that work. Another option is house sitting, where you watch over someone's property during the off-season, like summer in a ski town or winter at the beach, which can provide free housing if you're open to moving seasonally. If you can eliminate or drastically reduce housing costs, that $20,000 to $25,000 per year suddenly goes a lot further, covering basic needs with much less stress. And depending on your strategy, this income could be entirely tax-free. Young retirees also have a lot of flexibility when it comes to relocating to a place where the cost of living is much lower, either permanently or semi-permanently. Even with housing costs minimized in a low-cost lifestyle abroad, a little part-time work or hobby income can make a huge difference. It definitely doesn't have to be full-time, but a part-time side hustle or job could bring in $500 to $1,000 per month easy. Retirement doesn't have to be an abrupt stop after decades of work. Many people are choosing semi-retirement, living on modest savings while working in different ways. By staying flexible, using creativity, and making smart lifestyle choices, even younger people can retire comfortably on $500,000 or less. It's not ideal, but it's far from impossible. Millions are already doing it. The key is structuring your life around what you have and being strategic, realistic, and a little creative. And that brings up the question, if you had to retire today with $500,000 or less, what would your strategy be? Would you downsize, work part-time, or move somewhere cheaper? Let us know in the comments, because hearing everyone's different approaches could help a lot of people watching this video.